Over the last 50 years, women have continued to pave the way, push the boundary, and become the forefront of the conversation. From playing to coaching to advising and so much more, women have made history in sports. Now it's time to put that history on full display and allow these influential women to tell her story. I'm Brie, Andras, and as a woman in the sports world myself, I know there's so much more to these athletes and those that shape them other than what they're able to do in competition. While the buckets, stuck landings, home runs, and wins on top of wins do mean a lot, I'm looking to find the story of how people got to where they are in women's sports and how they've seen the game grow. I'm also looking to find out who they are behind their sport. This is the Her Story podcast. Taylor Jacobs, welcome to the Her Story podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So just give me a little background on you. And we know you're the associate AD in charge of NIL and stuff, but who is Taylor Jacobs?
Oh, wow. That's a loaded question. Well, to start, I'm originally from Dallas, Texas. I was a collegiate athlete. I did not go to LSU. I was a tennis player at Auburn University, where I met my now husband. We moved here back in 2014. And I got into college athletics. While I was in college, I had a mentor that was a big impact in my life. She was my senior women administrator at Auburn and just made me really want to get into the college athletics space. So we moved to Baton Rouge, started working at LSU full-time, December of 14, I think, and started in compliance and then stepped into the NIL world. And yeah, I mean, it's been a whirlwind. Outside of that, I am a very creative person, which is probably a big part of why I took on NIL. And I'm a mom, which has also been a newer title of mine in the last 5 years. So that's been really exciting as well.
So your experience as a student athlete, obviously NIL wasn't a thing. Was that ever in the back of anyone's mind that this could become a thing one day?
Not when I was an athlete. I think, sure, probably your football and basketball student athletes were starting that conversation at the time. Social media wasn't what it is today when I was an athlete. I think Instagram actually started around the time I graduated. So the rise of that social media influencer era has, I think, made this conversation speed up a lot more. You saw, with people like Livy Dunn, who came to campus with a major following, built a major following in COVID. She was missing out on opportunities that she could potentially pursue on social media because of the restrictions in the name, image, and likeness space. So I think social media kind of sped it up. And not to mention, obviously, the TV contracts and coaches' salaries and the bigger conversations around that. So I would say probably, 4 years into my compliance career. So I'm 4 years out of my collegiate career. We started having more conversations about it. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of, I felt like we were talking about it. And then all of a sudden it was like, wait, it's here, July 1, 2021, everyone get ready. And we had to be ready.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like, I knew the conversations were going around, but it just kind of seemed like it just dropped out of nowhere. Like one day it was like, we don't know when it's going to happen. Then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's tomorrow. Like it's going to happen really soon. So your role in all of this and being the associate AD and director of NIL, did that kind of come to you or did you go to it? Did you seek out that position?
So I definitely went to it. When we started having conversations about NIL, 6 to 8 months ahead of July 1 of 2021, we had started kind of a little committee of different individuals, senior level administrators, coaches, different staff members that we brought together to start kind of preparing for it. At that time, I was a compliance coordinator. So I oversaw, recruiting, initial eligibility stuff. It was your pretty standard compliance role, but because I have a creative background, have a little bit of a background in social media myself, my boss at the time said, hey, I feel like you would be really good in this space. So I started going to those meetings and those, being a part of those conversations. And eventually it came time to who's going to raise their hand and lead it. And I remember sitting down with one of our senior level administrators at the time and said, hey, I really want to do this. I feel like I could be really good at it. And raised my hand and just took it on, and I feel like it's just skyrocketed ever since, honestly.
What did it mean to you to have so much support from, the departments behind you, that they were fully backing you into running this whole thing?
Well, I mean, you always want that belief and that buy-in and that empowerment, and I feel like with it from all the way from the top down, right? Our AD, Scott, he really wanted to be at the forefront of this NIL space, so he encouraged his senior level administrators, and they really challenged us and pushed us. And so then eventually, when you're looking at something that is potentially so big, saying, well, I want to raise my hand and I want to be a part of it, honestly, I didn't know what they were going to say, and I didn't know if they were going to say yes, but the fact that they not only said yes, but just continued to empower me to be aggressive in the space and to host events and education and get in front of our athletes and really make NILSU what it is today. I mean, you couldn't ask for better leadership, honestly.
Whenever NIL became legalized, how did it kind of start for the athletes? What did that kind of look like from your perspective to, where it is now, and, these are mega famous athletes?
Yeah, so July 1 of 2021, I was up in my dining room in my kitchen area probably until like 2 or 3 a.m. because athletes started getting DMs at midnight, and they were all texting me like, can I do this deal? What does this mean? Here's this contract. So it quite literally, the switch flipped overnight, right? On June, at the end of June, as a compliance coordinator, we were actually educating the athletes on, you cannot take extra benefits from, outside entities because that jeopardizes your eligibility. And then on July 1 of 2021, we're like, okay, here's how you can go manage a contract and navigate this and get yourself an NIL deal. So we just were aggressive in getting in front of the athletes, blasting out a ton of communication. It was summer, so athletes aren't always here in the summer. We held several Zoom sessions leading up to July 1 to make sure everyone was prepared. We wanted them to understand, what to look for, what things to be thinking about when engaging in NIL, and then the disclosure component, which was a big thing. So held a bunch of Zooms, got in front of athletes, was just available. Giving out my phone number basically to say, text me or call me if you have any questions. And then once they got back onto campus in August, we were getting in front of every single team, making sure they understood, one, the resources we were going to start providing, follow along with us. I'm the point person if you have any questions, and then building out that core education. And in the beginning of NIL, it was really important for us to sit down and talk with the athletes to understand, what kind of things are you experiencing? So obviously we knew people's DMs were getting flooded because they were being offered deals, but then it was, okay, well, are you being asked to post more on social? Is it more autographs? Is it appearances? Understanding IP and the use of IP and all of this, I myself knew generally like LSU IP versus an athlete's brand, but the ins and outs of campus restrictions and then athletics restrictions and making sure our athletes knew all that information, again, it just escalated very, very quickly. So then from July to January, I would say it was very student athlete focused. Like, you have to understand NIL, you have to understand your brand versus the LSU brand. And then going into February of 22, we held our first event for the businesses called Go Time. And that was when we had almost 500 businesses that night, just basically educating them on what is NIL, how do you get involved, and here's my cell phone, which that was a game changer too. And I feel like from there, things really skyrocketed because now we brought the businesses into the fold and we were educating them at a high level as well as our athletes and teaching both groups like the importance of that connection and those NIL opportunities.
At what point did you notice that this NIL thing was going beyond just, local businesses that were sponsoring athletes, and it was like big name brands and commercials and billboards seen around the world? At what point did you notice that?
Well, obviously we had Livy Dunn on campus, and she was instrumental in us being as prepared as we were at the launch of things on July 1 of 2021. Her brand being restricted prior to the passing of NIL to then being able to go do the things she was doing. So we quickly saw her doing things, right? So that was something where it was like, okay, wait, she's out, like this is going to be really big and she's getting really major deals. And then it would have been the end of the spring semester, I guess, we saw two major recruits coming through with women's basketball in Angel Reese and Flau'jae Johnson. And so once they got onto campus and you had brands like Livy and Angel and Flau'jae, it was like, okay, this is, I feel like, gonna escalate quickly. And you just start to see, like, we started to see a ton of national opportunities between them, but then also I think because of how aggressive NILSU was and the fact that we were saying we want NIL deals, we want things to happen, brands were more eager to work with us, or our athletes, which was really cool too. You know, NIL was still new. We were open and put in positions to where we could share a story nationally through speaking engagements that I had to where our athletes could be. And I don't know, it was just really cool to see that conversation. And then to see those brands just really unfold and, you know, faces on TVs when I'm laying at home at night on my couch and I see commercials play. I'm like, oh, cool.
I feel like at some schools, you know, when you think of NIL, especially when this whole thing got started, it was mainly going to be your football players or your big basketball players that got the big deals. But at LSU, consistently over the past 4 years, it's been women that have been running the shows with Livy, Angel, Flau'jae. Like you said, they've been some of the highest paid college athletes in the country with this. Do you take a lot of pride in that, you know, you shed a lot of light on, you know, female athletes here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's been one of the coolest things, and it's something I say often is the general consumer kind of has a misnarrative of NIL, right? To your point, a lot of people think, oh, it's just paying football and basketball, but it's truthfully not. And that was the biggest reason why we wanted to participate in The Money Game, the documentary that aired on Amazon Prime, because I wanted people to see that these athletes are working really hard and they're doing a lot of really cool things. And a lot of our female student athletes are leading the way, and they have brought a lot more attention and eyes to the sport. And I think that's been really cool to see how you're almost like cross-promoting different, I guess, genres or different areas. I mean, if you look at Angel, she has this major basketball brand, but she's also made a really big impact in the fashion world, and she's on the red carpet at the Met Gala, and then Flau'jae's there, and Sha'Carri Richardson, and Geaux, and I think Jamar was there too, and you're hearing as people are walking down the red carpet of the Met Gala, announcers and hosts and people talking about LSU and LSU Athletics on the red carpet of the Met Gala. And I think that's what you've seen a lot with women's sports too, is because these female athletes are doing so much in the NIL space and are building such major brands, more eyes are on them. People are saying, oh, they're an athlete, I want to watch them compete. It's drawing more viewership to the sport. It's really elevated, you know, women's athletics, and that is honestly has been so cool, because I've obviously known that our female student athletes are great and have been very passionate about developing our female student athletes as a former female student athlete. But I don't know, I love it when a fan or someone says, oh, I met so-and-so, or I saw their commercial, or we came and watched them because we saw the commercial. Like, my daughter is really, you know, she's a huge Flau'jae fan because she loves her music, and now she gets to come watch her play basketball and she wants to play basketball. Like, those are the kind of stories, that's what makes this whole thing worth it.
On the other side of that, just athletes in general, I mean, Livy and Flau'jae, they already had, you know, their following and their brands prior to this, but have you seen some athletes maybe kind of struggle to navigate, you know, their newfound fame and the attention and, you know, maybe the added pressure that comes with, you know, the NIL side of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think generally when we get in front of them at the beginning of their career, we're really intentional to make sure they know, like, hey, first off, it's okay to say no. So you don't have to take every deal that's thrown at you. 2, it's okay to take a breath. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel like you need help, that's literally what our staff is here for. So come and see us and we can kind of help you digest things better. So that's been helpful. And I have seen a ton of communication with our athletes and myself or my staff, which I appreciate very much. I think that because, again, we're getting in front of them at the beginning of their careers, we're able to help them navigate things more easily to where they don't feel as overwhelmed, because they know from the beginning they can come to us and we can help them with that. But yeah, I mean, you see very quickly people say, oh my goodness, I went from not really having a social media following to being elite on this team, and now I'm being requested everywhere, and it can be overwhelming, and you have to learn how to navigate it, but that's part of it. And again, something we even say on their recruiting visits is NIL is a job. You do have to be ready and willing to commit to it, because there's going to be demands, there's going to be time demands, you're going to have to do things that you might not feel like doing. I mean, I say it to them all the time. I don't feel like getting up and coming to work every single day. There are days where I say, I just really want to stay at home, but I got to come into work. Otherwise, my boss is going to be like, where are you? So reminding them of that, which then also helps kind of direct their path of how involved they want to get in it, or how involved, how little involvement they want to have with it.
Whenever you were building all these different initiatives to kind of like help bring the word out to athletes and to the brand, you made an emphasis on them focusing on their lives after their careers are done athletically, and especially with, a sport like gymnastics where there is no pro level other than maybe the Olympics. That's something that they really need to take into account. Have you seen that over the past 4 years, in their careers, and they go off and use the things they've learned through their NIL and, taking that into, a career of their own?
Yeah, we've definitely seen that a ton. I think whether we've seen an athlete who's built up a major social media following and they've graduated and they've gone on to basically be a social media influencer, we've seen a lot of that. We've seen athletes who've leveraged their relationships in their NIL deals and they've gone on to get jobs with those companies afterwards. And again, that's the biggest thing I need them to know, right? It cannot just be about the one deal or the 4 deals while you're in college. You have to understand how to leverage these relationships and build that network, because those relationships you make when you're a student athlete, if you handle yourself appropriately and you do well and you're a good person, that's going to open up so many doors for you after you graduate. I mean, I think about myself alone. I didn't have NIL, right? But I was working really hard. I volunteered in my athletic department. I put in a lot of hours. I raised my hand anytime anyone needed help. And at the end of the day, when I needed, I wanted to work at LSU, they called the people that I used to work for at Auburn. And they said, how is this girl a good human? Is she a hard worker? And I have to believe I had a positive reference, so these NIL deals, those are going to be new references, right? Because if, let's just say, a student athlete works with Powerade and they have to show up to a commercial shoot and they have to post on social media and they have to go to an appearance, well, maybe they make it into the professional level. Well, some brand could know the executive working at Powerade and might call and say, what was it like working with this athlete? And you want the response to be positive. You want them to say, they were great. They were on time. They were awesome to work with. We loved working with their team. It was easy, because that's going to lead to more and more opportunity, whether it be an NIL deal or a potential job. So, that's something that we will always stress in NILSU, and building that network is super important.
Most recently, you guys launched the brand. Can you just tell me a little bit about that, how that came to be, how long it took for you guys to kind of launch this thing and where it's going?
Yeah, so the brand was a long project. Zach Greenwell is our new Senior Associate AD of External and oversees all of these units that really impact a student athlete, a team, a coach's brand, right? And so when he first got here, I don't want to say we weren't working together. We were all very much working together, because I especially would over communicate with people. However, we weren't all in the same space. I was in a different building. The creative team was over here. It was kind of a different space, but he came in and said, hey, we should make this cohesive, and what does this look like? We started having conversations, and we just kept settling on the fact that LSU is arguably the premier brand in college athletics, and so this is the brand. This is where you come to develop a brand, build a brand, leverage your brand, all the things, right? So we started that narrative of what that looked like, really leaning into Shaquille O'Neal and Shaq and the brand that he built while he was here and how he's leveraged that after. And then just started to visually tell the story of this space and all of the units that make up the brand, how they impact each of, our athletes, our teams, our coaches. And we started the conversation, it would have been last summer. It was probably this time last summer, so July of 24. We finished the designs. Our creative team designed everything in the space physically, finished the designs going into the end of December, beginning of January, and then implemented, the designs in the hallway. And it's been great. I mean, our recruits love coming up here. They love seeing it. We have this podcast studio. We've got photo shoot rooms. We've got video shoot rooms. And, you know, we're here to help. And they're quite literally, you cannot come up here and try to argue with me if you are going to tell me that we're not going to help you build your brand, because you quite literally have everything you need here. So it's been really cool.
Obviously, the NIL space plays a big part in recruiting nowadays. Have you seen that kind of LSU's initiative and, I guess, passion for making sure these athletes have these opportunities have helped bring athletes in for, you know, for these whatever teams they want to play for?
Absolutely. I think, you know, if you step back, the student athlete experience is what you use to recruit. So back in my day, it was facilities and the town that the school is in and the coaches, and, you know, then facilities probably started to play an even bigger role between when I graduated and before NIL. And now NIL makes up a major component of the student athlete experience. And so that's the biggest conversation when we're meeting with recruits, is them understanding, one, if you haven't heard about us yet, I'm not really sure how you've missed it, because we quite literally have put NILSU everywhere. But if you haven't heard about us yet, we need you to understand that we are committed to this space. Just like you have academic resources, strength and conditioning resources, mental health resources, we, LSU, have invested in the staff, the physical space, all of the opportunity for you to build a brand and find NIL opportunity here. So it's played a major role. We pretty much meet with just about every recruit that comes on campus at this point. It's a major component of what the NILSU staff does, making sure, again, they know what we're doing, the resources we provide, and then how they can use us when they hopefully sign with us and become student athletes at LSU.
I wanted to ask just the vision that you had whenever this whole thing got started. Obviously, it's bigger than anyone could have imagined. Like you said, LSU is the premier brand of college athletics, but did you see NIL launching it to just the next level whenever the whole thing started?
I really didn't. I mean, I'm a very competitive person by nature, so I can remember when Scott, our athletic director, and she was our deputy AD at the time, I was kind of reporting, I guess, to her on NIL stuff, and I can remember them both saying, we have to be the best in this space, and me thinking, all right, I'll take that as a challenge. We are going to be the best. We are going to do everything that we have to be the best. And I don't think it really hit me until we were in the thick of conversations about the documentary. I knew, obviously, we had premier names on campus who were doing amazing things and engaging in really big opportunities. But at that point, when this documentary crew is coming to say, hey, we want to tell this overall story of NIL and NILSU and what does that look like, I was like, wow, I guess we really are on a different level. And that sounds, I don't want that to sound like cocky or whatever, but no, I don't think it was never a revision. I, at the time, was just like, this is so much more fun than compliance. Like, I would rather do this. And then things escalated, and I feel like, again, to be a female in the space, being able to invest in the next generation and with our student workers and just all the opportunity that it has provided has been such a blessing and really cool. And I couldn't change it. You know, I wouldn't want to change it for the world.
Whenever this NIL thing launched in 2021, there was obviously a lot of misconceptions, different opposing feelings, and that's still true today. What would you say is something that people maybe quite don't understand, or a misconception about NIL that, you know, they should?
I think there's still that misconception out there that it's just pay for play. And I mean, people in my own family will say all the time, well, y'all are just paying athletes, but we're actually not. So if y'all would sit down and watch the documentary, then you would know that's not at all what we're doing. You know, I think that is something that I've always wanted the world and people to know, is these athletes are great people. They're hard workers. They're super competitive. They have incredible stories, and they're willing to work hard and put in the work and hustle. And, you know, I think I say it in the documentary, but NIL, it takes hustle, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to teach you how to hustle. So that's the narrative that I want people to see. I don't necessarily want them to just see pay for play. I want them to see, what our track student athletes are doing and putting the work in behind the scenes and building a brand, and our softball and tennis and everything up to basketball, football, baseball, they're all putting in the work, even at the football and basketball level where people are saying, oh, they're just getting paid. No, they're doing work. We have a long photo shoot tomorrow night, actually. So they're doing the work. So I think that's the thing is I don't want people to think it's just a handout, because it's not. They're working really, really hard for it, and it can be exhausting, and they're hustling and they're putting in the work.
I really appreciated that about the documentary, because there was, obvious Angel and Livy and Jaden Daniels and stuff, but they did show, a walk-on men's basketball player in Trace Young, and then a track athlete that maybe is not as famous as the other people on the documentary, but showing how they are, like you said, hustling to get their own NIL deals, but maybe at a different level. What was that whole documentary experience like, kind of from start to finish?
Oh, it started with so many conversations, because when we started the conversation, the deputy AD who was here when NIL passed was really excited and eager to do it, and then she left to take another opportunity, and our current executive deputy came in, and she was looking at me like, you want to do what? You want to participate in a documentary about NIL? Like, you've lost your mind? So it was a lot of conversation. Ultimately, we obviously all landed on a place of, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to take this risk and we're going to try it. And then to get them on campus filming, they talked with a ton of athletes in the prep phase, trying to figure out who the stories were going to be and who they were going to follow. And that was really cool, just to let them meet a bunch of the athletes. And then they kind of settled on their few that they really wanted to focus on. And it was cool to see it all come to light and see everything that the athletes were doing. Like you mentioned, Aaliyah Armstrong was the track student athlete that she was coming to meet with me almost weekly. Just basically, she had a major social media following. She's one of, the fastest women in the world. She's an incredible athlete in the track world. And she came to me one day and said, why don't I have more NIL deals? And that's, again, the thing that is crazy to me, because she is a premier elite Olympic athlete and she's not getting the same outreach. And that's been something that I've been trying to learn and navigate and help with, is that I want all of the businesses who engage in NIL to make sure they see all of our rosters, right? Like, they might not be educated on track and field. It's not as televised. You don't see as many of those athletes. However, if I can bring you those names and help you understand who these athletes are, that they'll be potentially competing at the Olympics, that they would be long-term investments, like, then the businesses are like, wait, whoa, this is really cool. Same thing goes with, our women's tennis team right now. We have some elite women's tennis players who are going to be and are already competing at the French Open, Wimbledon. So why wouldn't you want to buy in to those brands, And so I think that's where, again, NILSU comes in, of bringing awareness and education so that people aren't just distracted by football, baseball, basketball, but making sure they understand the scope of all of our athletes.
Do you think, or do you prioritize the kind of like equal opportunity that, LSU men's golf player has the same NIL, opportunities? He can grow his brand the same way, a football player can. Is that something that's been important to you guys?
Yeah, so we will meet with any and every athlete. We meet with every team at the beginning of the year, and we tell the athletes, if you want to get more involved in this space, if you want to come work with us on building a brand, you reach out, schedule a meeting. So we will meet with any athlete one-on-one. We're available for any and everyone. All of our educational events are catered to every team. We aren't doing anything just for one team that we aren't doing for someone else. So again, getting the messaging out of, you all can do this. You have to believe in it, one, and you can't just sit back and say, oh, well, I'm just a golfer, or I'm just, no. If you want to get into this space, take the initiative. Let's do it. Let's figure out what brands you want to work with, and let's go. So yeah, we're open and available to everyone. And then again, going back to the brands, when we're having conversations with them, it's important for us to make sure they do understand every athlete, every roster. At the end of the day, the brand is going to have the decision to say, well, my vision for this campaign, it was this sport. But sometimes they might say, oh, I never knew that LSU had a beach volleyball team, or I never knew that, we had a swimming and diving team. So again, it's about the exposure and the education to give the brands all of the information they would need to work with an athlete. And then again, giving the athlete all the information they would need to build a brand and start on this NIL journey.
Now you guys are entering a brand new phase of this whole, world of NIL, I guess you could say, with revenue share. That's going to get going here pretty soon. Just how long have you been preparing for that? And what do you think it's going to look like in the early days?
Yeah, we've been, the last year really having the conversations and preparing for it, really heavy hitting it the last 6 to 8 months, similar to how we kind of prepared for NIL back in 2021, doing the same thing with revenue share. We have an intimate group committee that's been meeting regularly to understand what is our contract going to look like, how are we going to distribute our contract, what platform are we going to use to make our payments, any and everything that you can think of. We've been having those conversations. So I do feel like we're prepared. We're ready to go. We have a good group ready. We've actually already sent out some revenue share agreements. So starting the process. I was sweating last week when they went out, but they're out. And, I think this is going to be a big learning curve for schools across the country, right? We, as an institution, have never been able to write an agreement between us and an athlete. I've seen 1,000,001, but our senior level leadership is saying, well, hold on, there's all these things that we need to be thinking about from an academic standpoint and this. And it's a lot of conversation of making sure we get it to that right point. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of learning curves. Like, we very well might go through this year and get a ton of feedback, and we might tweak it going into next year, but I feel like we're in a really good place. We're ready to go. Like I said, some agreements have been sent out, some have been signed. We're moving into the new era. And we'll just be ready to pivot. As I always say, you cannot work in NIL or college athletics really at this point and not be ready and willing to pivot.
I feel like college athletics has changed more over the past 5 years than it has over the last 50 years. Would you agree?
Oh, yes. It's insane, the changes we've seen.
What do you hope for LSU with NIL and revenue share and everything that this whole world is going to become, past, this point today? I'm incredibly thankful for the leadership that we have, because I think the vision is still very much, let's make sure this benefits everybody. And that's great to be thinking about, and that we can even be in that position. So I hope that we continue to move forward in that regard, and that we'll be able to provide opportunity across all of our sports and really enhance the third-party NIL space. I'm always going to continue educating. I may not be in the weeds of educating day in and day out like I used to be, but making sure NILSU is providing all the resources and everything that our student athletes need. But, as it continues to go on, I hope that we continue to stay at the forefront of the space, and at the end of the day that our athletes leave here and say, I had NILSU and it was awesome. As a woman in your position, the first of your position, what do you hope that people remember about you when your time at LSU is up?
Oof. I don't like to think about people like remembering me or thinking about me, I guess. I would like to hope that they would say, she was a trailblazer in the space. I don't think I grasp it all the time now, but I do think that, someday I have a little girl who's 1.5, and I hope that one day she gets to be a college athlete. And quite honestly, I hope she takes a class in college and they start talking to her about NIL. And I don't know, it would be cool for her to say, my mom was at the forefront of that space. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's just being a trailblazer, being at the forefront of it, and not being afraid of it.
Awesome. Well, I learned so much today that I did not know before. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me.